For Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from Daniella's book, Uncultured, about growing up in the Children of God religious cult and then going into the U.S. Army. You can get autographed copies in the bio or in the descriptions, and you can find the t-shirts in my disrespectful t-shirts. Chapter 11, Apocalypse Now. Belo Horizonte, Brazil, 1999. Throughout the last year of the millennium, our level of persecution, panic, and preparations increased steadily, and it seemed even the systemites were paying attention this time. They'd given this version of the apocalypse the name Y2K, and it was coming because of man's reliance on computers and their lack of trust in God. After our last predicted apocalypse of 1993 hadn't occurred, many had lost faith or been purged from the family. I wondered what would happen this time. The adults were near euphoric, as though everything they'd sacrificed in their lives, all the creature comforts, money, careers, and family connections, was finally going to pay off. They would be vindicated and proved right. All I understood was that as soon as it became the year 2000, we weren't going to have electricity or clean water anymore. I lived each day worried about whether the ensuing mass confusion would be the beginning of the end times, something I'd secretly begun to hope would never happen. Blasphemous, since preparing for the end times was the whole point of our religion. I guessed Mama Maria had learned from Grandpa's past predictions because she never flat out said that Y2K would be the end of the world. Grandpa had a few prophecies not come true, lost a bunch of followers, and then had to explain all the reasons why, and assure everyone he was still the voice of God. The ones who stayed, like my parents, doubled down on their beliefs. This potential apocalypse worked the same way as all the other times, though. Something big was coming, and we needed to get ready. Everybody had to get right with God, rededicate themselves to His will, and spend additional hours every day reading His Word and praying for guidance. We all needed to recommit, to become true believers, to deepen our faith and dedication. There were endless special ceremonies and loads of disaster preparation. In the end, we, God's chosen people, would be saved, while everyone else would spend an eternity in hell. I wanted the date to come and pass so we could move on to the next thing. 1 year to the next didn't make much of a difference to me. A lifetime of disappointment and growing doubts had reached their breaking point. At 13, after getting excited and then disillusioned by the charter and how much it would really change our lives, after 2 years of cooking and labor instead of focusing on school, I'd decided that I was basically done. I knew I probably wouldn't be able to leave the family until I was 18, since I didn't have any obvious relatives or connections on the outside. But as the family prepared for the coming apocalypse, I started my own preparations. My plan to leave were the secret I kept in the deepest part of the box hidden in my mind. Until I could escape, nothing would matter much, even the supposed coming apocalypse. In addition to my solitary time in the kitchen, I spent more time on long walks, by myself. My one-on-one time with Mom disappeared as our walks expanded to group outings with the other teen girls through the neighborhoods surrounding our commune. As much as I missed our time alone together, I knew being with the teenagers gave Mom a kind of freedom that she'd never had before. I could see how much she enjoyed planning canned food drives, going to the free zoo, and taking us to ride bikes around a nearby lake. With us kids and teens, she was out of the presence of the watchful eyes of other family adults for the first time in her life, just like we were. On one such walk, my whole world changed. We were on a group outing in December, in the middle of summer in Brazil, and the flowers were out in full force, rain showers coming to water them at a moment's notice, then moving on, leaving blue sky and drenched earth. Getting caught in the rain was a pleasant enough feeling in the intense heat of an equatorial summer, but eyeglasses and the rain will never be friends, so I fell behind the others while trying to wipe the drops from my lenses, squinting hard to avoid tripping over my feet. I had to run to catch up to Mom, who looked back with a casual air and said, "Well, at least your vision isn't as bad as your sister Claire's. She's had to wear Coke bottle glasses practically since she was born." but I didn't have a sister Claire. For some reason, the expression Coke bottle glasses slipped around and around in my brain. I had never heard the phrase before. How could Coke bottles possibly help anyone see? And what would Mom know about the most evil of sodas? But my head felt like it was going to explode. "What sister Claire?" I whispered hoarsely, more of a demand than a question. A look of surprise and confusion traveled across Mom's face, but she continued as natural as ever. "You know, Claire and Cherish and Jonathan and Deborah from all the family music videos? Their dad is your dad, too." My head felt light and funny, the way it did with champagne, the way it did with the boys playing their games back in Rio, with the uncles and their punishments, like I wasn't really in my body anymore. By this point, I had stopped walking, but Mom and the rest of the teen girls were still moving ahead. I was frozen in place as all the puzzle pieces fell into position inside my mind. Claire, my middle name. I thought of my baby photo album, full of pictures of me and my 15-year-old mom and our family tree. In the spot for Dad was the teenage boy my mom had been married off to when she was 17. They were together for 2 years, and he was gone before I was 5, before I could really remember much about him. Everyone said Mary looked like him, but I never thought to question why I didn't. I watched Mom walking ahead, chatting casually with the older teen girls around her, as if my life, my very knowledge of myself, wasn't being completely transformed. My mind made connection after connection, and I tried to make my legs race as fast as my brain to catch up to the rest of the group, scared I'd be left behind on that dirt road and never figure out how to get back to the compound. When I caught up to them, out of breath, they were still laughing and talking. Nobody else was surprised by this revelation. Everyone knew, and everyone thought I knew, because it hadn't been a secret. It just wasn't talked about much. I was the only one who'd been left in the dark. When the gates of the compound finally came into view, I felt a brief reprieve from the fear I always carried that I would be left on my own after dark. But as soon as we were inside, I bolted from the group, running to where I kept my book of photos, one of my few prized possessions that made every move with me. I frantically flipped through the pages until I found what I was looking for, and then I stared and stared. That single photo of me, at not quite 2, in a pink dress with an old-fashioned lace collar and a head covered in baby curls, snuggled next to Mom. She's wearing a nondescript tan shirt and a hippie-style long skirt, and I can tell she's probably already pregnant with Mary. Sitting next to her, previously unexplained to me, is Uncle John, the olive-skinned, curly-haired, and bespectacled lieutenant in the Prophet's inner circle who had been sent away somewhere secret after I was born. He was at least twice, if not 3 times, her age. There was no reason that Mom would have been allowed to keep a picture of another adult, especially one so Selah, if what she was saying wasn't true. That man, that 50-year-old man, was my real father. In almost every way but my skin color, I saw that I could be his mirror image. Everything made perfect sense. My unruly curly hair that none of Mom's other kids had, exactly the same hair 2 of our most famous video stars wore long and unencumbered on nearly every video we watched. My sisters. The extremely poor eyesight I had, but Mom and Mary and the boys didn't. Why Mary and I looked so obviously different from each other, even though I'd always believed we shared the same parents. This was why I looked nothing like Mom's, because this man's, my father's, strong features overpowered all her soft ones. A moment of relief washed through me that I had never had a crush on Jonathan from the videos, my brother, with his movie star looks, the way all the other preteen girls did. From the way the aunties were sent from bed to bed, and based on how important Uncle John still was, I wondered how many other siblings I had in our world that I didn't know existed. But as I stared at the picture, I understood what I had always known deep down, but had never been able to articulate. Something more significant than having my world turned upside down and the basis of my identity changed. As I studied his face over and over, seeing elements of myself so clearly reflected that I wondered how I'd never seen it before, I realized what was wrong. She was so young, and he was so old. I'd never thought too much about having a younger mother, other than the fact that she was cooler than any of the other aunties. I'd known she'd gotten pregnant with me at 14, which was younger than a lot of the girls, but not by too much. There were plenty of 15 and 16-year-old mothers in the children of God. And yes, I knew after my birth there had been a Mo letter with Grandpa chiding older men to be more careful about getting the young teens pregnant. And from there, the rules about sex with minors had gotten stricter, at least outwardly. But I realized then it had been because of my birth. I could picture Gramps so young looking with his quirky smile and that stupid "I'm not 50" t-shirt. Was my dad older than my grandfather? When the charter came out and made sex with kids an excommunicable offense, the adults acknowledged that it was wrong, though we'd still been warned to never go backward, never question what the prophet had taught us at the time. I knew when Mom had gotten pregnant with me, there hadn't been any rules. Sexual contact between adults and minors had been considered God's will, and limitations we placed on it were only because of the outside world. So according to the family, the adults in charge hadn't done anything wrong. Uncle John having sex with a 14-year-old girl was allowed, so nobody questioned it. Despite the new rules, we still couldn't question what was done before. But that was impossible. Uncle John had stayed in the senior leadership, protected. The old way and the charter were opposites. They could not both be true. My 13-year-old mind reeled. The people in charge were, and always had been, full of shit. The word rape was anathema to us. Our children's comics, like Heaven's Girl, taught us that it was impossible to be raped if we yielded, and we were always supposed to yield to sex, to any advance of a man. Smile, be pretty, show Jesus' love. If we chose to give our bodies to attackers as a sign of love, it was not rape. Neither was anything done in the family of love, ever. I realized then the truth I had always suspected. They were liars. They had always been liars. But even worse, they hurt kids. They hurt us. A series of thoughts repeated in my head over and over. Lines of writing burned into my skull. That was rape. That was wrong. Nobody should hurt young girls the way I've been hurt, the way Mom has been hurt. That should never have happened. I couldn't stop my head from spinning in circles, could not stop the thought I knew I would never be able to unthink. I should not exist. That night, I lay under my covers in the dark, the photo stashed under my pillow, with a bottle of bleach I'd pilfered from the laundry room tucked alongside my mattress. I imagined drinking it, dying a painful but hopefully quick death. This was the first time I seriously contemplated the actual logistics of suicide. I didn't know if I could make it to 18. Those 5 years felt impossible. I'd been living this life for 13 years and couldn't imagine doing it for one day more. Not one more lie, not one more betrayal, not one more abuse, or rape, or torture. I couldn't pretend anymore. I didn't believe in the children of God. I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe in family. I didn't even know if I believed in myself, because in an instant, it was so easy to discover who I always thought I was had been a lie, along with everything else. I watched the darkness fade outside the bars on the window as light threatened to dawn on yet another identical day. As the sun crested over the mountaintops, I tried to stuff everything I'd learned, everything I couldn't change, into the box within myself, but the box was too crowded. Or maybe I no longer had the key. I remembered with relief that maybe, just maybe, the world was ending soon. It wouldn't matter anyway.